Let's talk about AI for a little bit. Chances are, if you have spent any amount of time on the internet over the past couple months, on social media, YouTube, whatever, you've seen the headlines. This is an issue that has a lot of hype around it right now. And those headlines, they range anywhere from, kids cheating on their homework, to how this is going to destroy art, to how this is going to be the end of humanity, right? It's Skynet. That's coming soon. So with all these forecasts being made, with all the hype around it, I figured, it's worth my time. I'm interested. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to offer up my unsolicited 2 cents to the world and open myself up to critique. But at the same time, I don't want to be one of these people that's just adding noise to the frequency, like these hustle bros that you run across on YouTube. The AI, it's coming for your job, and here's 5 things you need to do to not get left behind, and all that garbage. That's not this, okay? But let's talk about some of these forecasts that are being made. I'm having to play catch up, like many of you out there, I'm sure. I'm not an expert in this field. That goes without saying. This is something that I've, AI, when up until maybe, a few months ago, the first thing that came to mind when I thought of the term AI was this, the stupid ass NPCs in video games that don't work right. It wasn't something, until playing around with Midjourney, it wasn't something I even took all that seriously. I know Elon Musk's been out there for years screaming about how it's going to be the end of the world and this, that, and the other. And I never really bought it. Okay. Coming from him, especially when you always got to consider the source, right? So when somebody like Elon Musk is out there making these big, fantastical claims, you have to question his motivation. How much of this is, an honest to God fear that he has versus how much of it is, just self-motivated, right? Trying to sell you on the idea of, one of his products being far more capable than it actually is. That said, there are folks out there echoing these fears who are not, big time CEOs at, billion-dollar companies. One of those names is Eliezer Yudkowsky. He was recently in Time magazine, claiming that the 6-month moratorium that was proposed last March, signed by the likes of Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak, by the way, thousands of others. Yudkowsky's claim is that this doesn't go nearly far enough, and that all future training on these large language models needs to stop indefinitely. And he even goes as far as to call for airstrikes on servers of those not willing to comply. So, the dude is serious as a heart attack, okay? And he's not somebody who really stands to gain anything by making these claims. To me, from my perspective, he kind of looks like that kooky guy in the sci-fi movie that nobody wants to listen to, right? That the aliens are coming or whatever. He's sitting there in his fedora making all these weird faces, freaking the fuck out. That's how he comes off to me. But he's a highly intelligent guy, and he's been working in this field for decades, specifically working on alignment. And so if that is a term that is unfamiliar to you, what it is, aligning the goals of a future artificial general superintelligence, aligning its goals with those of humanity. As though somehow humanity has decided on a collective set of goals ourselves. But anyway, that's been his field of study for the better part of, like I said, 20 years or something like that. He's not a dummy. Okay, so when you hear somebody like that peddling these fears, for the lack of a better term, it gets your attention. It certainly got mine. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't freaked the fuck out for a good while, Because the other end of the spectrum, too, there are folks like Ben Goertzel, also an expert in the field, for even longer, but with a very different forecast. And, I don't want to misrepresent him and his beliefs, because it's a lot more nuanced and complicated than I'm going to make it out to be. So I would encourage, if you're not familiar with Ben Goertzel, go ahead and look him up. There's some really interesting conversations with him out there on YouTube. But ultimately, his vision of the future, when it comes to AGI, is one of utopia. Okay, it's far from the Skynet scenario, although he acknowledges that is a maybe remote possibility. He doesn't believe it to be likely. The future that he paints is much more akin to everybody's going to be like Tony Stark, right? We're all going to have this like high tech built into our own bodies, and everything's going to be great. Nobody's going to have to work. We're going to cure all the diseases. And that freaks me the fuck out just as much, if I'm being honest. Because anytime somebody starts talking about utopia, my mind immediately just goes to, cults and communism and that. So you're right. So every time I hear that conversation, I start thinking of mass graves and people getting burned out of compounds by the fucking feds, because that's usually how it ends. So that doesn't really settle my nerves either, that picture. And these are two of the brightest minds in the field. So where does that leave somebody like me? Where does that leave us, the little people, the lay people? We have to sit and think about this kind of stuff. I think it's impossible to make any kind of grand forecast like that, especially right now, because as has been pointed out to me by others, and, I've discovered in my, last couple months of doing the research into this shit, is that we are firmly, at least as of right now, we are stuck in the narrow band AI, right? These large language models, as impressive as they are still glorified calculators. That's what they are. It's what Midjourney is, right? These are systems that have been trained on the internet. So they have vast libraries of knowledge from which to pull. And when you prompt it, it goes through that library and mashes something together for you. And it's impressive, and it's easy to be fooled into thinking that these things are actually thinking machines, that they're somehow sentient or sapient. But it's far from that. Really far. But if you play around with ChatGPT for long enough, you could be convinced that this thing's actually intelligent. On the same token, you could take the dumbest guy in the room, and as long as he's got the ability to speak and read, have him read off something that was written by somebody intelligent, and maybe he could convince you he's smart. But it's not the best analogy, but I think you get my drift. We humans are pretty easily fooled, especially when it comes to things that we don't understand. And we're all kind of having to play catch up here, right? When it comes to these technologies. And fear is easy too, right? It's easy to scare us. And that goes back to our roots as a species. We don't always think logically. So, all these people that are forecasting the Skynet thing, or that are worried about it completely destroying the economy or ruining art in some way, fear is a very natural reaction because, again, going back to our, evolutionary roots, if we were out on the savannah with our little tribe and we hear a rustle in the bush behind us, we could make a couple assumptions. We could say, well, that's likely the wind, or it's likely a leopard. The safe assumption is that it's the leopard. You're naturally inclined to the fear, right? Because if you're not afraid and the rustling in the bush doesn't get your attention or cause you to worry, and it is a leopard, you're dead and you don't get to spread your genes. But if you assume the leopard and you turn around and it was just the wind after all, well, guess what? You keep moving on and you get to spread your genes. So we kind of bear the cross of our evolutionary roots. And I've always said, there's two things that, speaking of evolution, there's two things that we humans cannot compete with in terms of evolution. As much as we like to think of ourselves as the rulers of this planet, microbes will always outpace us. That's one of them. We it doesn't matter how many antibacterial soaps we invent. Doesn't matter how many vaccines we come up with. Germs, viruses, microbes, they're going to keep finding a way to evolve. COVID, I think, should have reminded most of us of that. And the other thing, of course, is technology. For all the good that the internet has brought us, it's also kind of showing us a lot of issues that we have as a species. Teen depression is at an all-time high. Birth rates are plummeting. People have poor body image. We're able to be manipulated by media outlets and governments and corporations. We're able to be turned on one another easily. I mean, look, again, to point at COVID. I don't care what your position is on that, but I don't think it's very arguable that we're pretty divided. Here in America specifically, it's pretty fucking bad. I feel like we're always like one viral clip away from a riot. We latch on to things. We get angry. The algorithms know how to manipulate us. It's predatory. And we let it happen to ourselves. We want more of it. More convenience. So yeah, with the advancement of AI, I don't see that improving. I've always been someone, I'm not a particularly religious person, but I do believe that all life, all of nature requires balance. You go too far one way or the other, and you end up falling off a fucking cliff. Okay, so I do worry, both in the short term and the long term, that these technologies are going to be very seductive. They are going to lead us further and further away from what makes us human. And so when I hear people like Ben Goertzel talking about these, grand utopic visions of this era of transhumanism, where we're going to merge with the machines, that's not very attractive to me. I don't want to forget what it is to be human. I hear people like him, and I've heard plenty of others echo these sentiments, where it's going to be so awesome in the future because we'll basically all be able to have superpowers. Won't it be cool? And it's like, no. Why would that be cool? What the fuck does it mean if everybody has them? How cool is having, the ability, remember, The Matrix. Keanu Reeves is able to just upload kung fu, right? But if everybody can do that, then it's not special, is it? And what makes mastering something like kung fu special anyway? The hard work, the dedication, right? I'm a guitar player. I'm not the best guitar player in the world, but it's something that I've been doing since I was 12 years old. So I've put like over 30 years into that particular skill. And when I'm able to finally pull something off in a solo that I worked really hard on, I'm proud. It brings me joy. It brings me happiness. Not to say, ha, 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 I'm better than you, but to just, be able to rise above a challenge. That's very human, and we need that as humans. That's why some people enjoy hunting, right? Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to get too down a rabbit hole. I fully acknowledge, because I know that there are people out there that are going to say, yeah, well, fucking sitting up in a tree blind with a rifle and waiting for a fucking deer to pop up and, lick your salt lick and just shooting him in the fucking head with a semi-automatic rifle isn't exactly a challenge. All right, well, I know what you're saying, but I think you know what I'm saying, and it's not that. You get my drift. Okay, we need something to overcome as humans. And so that's the other fear, is that when AI starts taking away all the desk jobs, because that's what's going to happen first, right? Plumbers, construction workers, lumberjacks, folks that work in the realm of physical labor are probably all right for now, at least. Because the robots coming, that's, I think, a bit further down the pike than these, generative systems. But yeah, if you work in copywriting, if you work in commercial art, essentially, if you work behind a desk, I'd be nervous if I were you. And I am nervous for what this is going to do to the economy. Because believe me, corporations are going to corporation. They're going to pinch pennies wherever they can. They're not going to pay somebody a salary to do something that a fucking algorithm can do for them for free, basically, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm no economist. Maybe somebody can enlighten me as to why I'm wrong, but that's kind of how I'm feeling. And so what's going to happen? What's going to happen to all these people that don't have a job anymore? What's going to happen to the coder who worked his ass off to be the best in his field? And now he has to go compete doing what? You going to go deliver pizzas? You going to learn how to fucking swing a hammer? You and everybody else, right? So that's a bit of a scary prospect. And so then, the UBI conversation has to be had. And I do think it's one that does have to be had. I mean, I don't think there's really any getting around that. I'm not saying in the next 2 years, 5 years, even 10 years, I don't know. But in our lifetime, that is a conversation that's going to have to be had. And I'm sure there are plenty of people out there, I've heard this sentiment before where it's like, well, I don't need a fucking 9 to 5 to give me meaning. Believe me, I'd love to be the fuck out of there, and I'll find something, at the beach to give me meaning, right? There's plenty of those out there, and good on you, I guess. Enjoy your early retirement. But beyond just, the economics of it, okay. Again, like, you're going to go learn an instrument. Why? Right. When you can just, type it into an algorithm. You can just give some artificial intelligence system a few prompts and you've got yourself a song. You've got yourself some artwork. You've got yourself, whatever, it's just, and again, like I said before, this is all in its infancy. Who knows what some of these systems are going to be capable of? Moving beyond the GPT-4 era. How much easier is life going to get before it's too fucking easy? Right? We're already seeing issues with the dating world. MGTOW was like a new concept to me up until a couple years ago. Right? Men going their own way. Just swearing off women, swearing off dating. Tinder came along and now people sit and swipe left, swipe right. Thank fucking God I'm not part of that world. I can't even imagine trying to navigate that world. At 5'8", right? I'm out no matter what my income is. You know, women and their standards these days, men and their, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what's happening to us. And I feel myself sounding like that old guy now. It's, oh, back in my day, the good old days. I don't want to be that guy, but it's kind of hard not to be. But let's address the elephant in the room too, by the way, when it comes to all that. If you think porn has an impact now, just wait. Just wait till like virtual reality or augmented reality. Wait till that technology really explodes. Right? And what young man is going to sit and waste time having to deal with one of these fucking entitled women when he can just go home, punch up a scenario, put on his headset, or whatever the fuck's going to be going on, right? Or when the sex bots come. I think birth rates are plummeting now. Oh, shit. But anyway, this kind of went in a weird direction that I didn't really have intended. But yeah, so yeah, long story short, I have my concerns when it comes to the possible outlook on the future. And I do lose sleep over it because I have two young little boys at home. Right? I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. And they're going to have to grow up in this world. And I don't even know how to, how do I raise them right now? And I mean, that's the thing. We have what you might call normalcy bias. I think a lot of us just are going to be blindsided. That's the other thing. I think all the stuff that I'm talking about still sounds like a fucking fantasy to a lot of people. Even those who have played with, ChatGPT and Midjourney. I don't think people are really prepared for how this is all going to shake down. And it's like, in the past, it was real easy. As a parent, you could say, oh, you got to go to school today. You got to get good grades so that you can go to college, so that you can get a degree, so you can get a good job, make a living, get a 401k, get a pension, whatever the fuck, right? Okay, now what? What's the workforce going to look like in 10 years when my 8-year-old is 18? What are his options going to be? Is there going to be a UBI? Who's footing the bill? And on a larger scale, not to get sidetracked, but, these utopic pictures that I so often hear painted about how awesome everything's going to be, how does this all get, doled out? Do you really think that, people in the poorest parts of Africa are going to have all the same luxuries as we here in the United States are going to have? Or, people in China or people in Western Europe. This is all going to be, I don't know. Again, I don't have a forecast when it comes to that, but it's a question that I'm asking. What does the world look like? But yeah, I am pretty, I'll be honest, I'm terrified as to like how not to fuck this up for my kids. Like, I want to raise them right. And I think big changes are on the horizon, and I want to do my best as a parent to prepare them, and I don't know what the fuck to do. I don't know how to approach it. So I guess for now, I don't want to bury my head in the sand, but I got to just, I think that's all we can do as the little people is just keep at it for now. I guess if you work behind a desk, it might be time to start really considering how replaceable you are. But I don't know, I could probably, sit and go on and on and on in all kinds of different directions when it comes to this. It's a big issue. So maybe I'm not done talking about it, but I do think I'm done talking about it for tonight. So feel free to leave me your thoughts. If you've made it this far, if you've actually sat there and listened to me rant for this long, I greatly appreciate it. And there will be more of these to come. This is pretty much something that I aim to stick with. Talking about issues that interest me. And maybe someday I'd like to, once I can get it worked out, have some guests on, people who are smarter than I am or more interesting than I am that I can bounce my ideas off of. But until next time, I'm going to call it a wrap for tonight. Thanks again. We'll see you later.